The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our Bisnode webinar, where we will introduce how to make smart data work for you as a marketer. I'm Madeleine Lindgren, and I'm head of digital marketing at Bisnode. And with us we have Pär Österlund, who is product director marketing at Bisnode, who will present our webinar today. If you have any questions during the webinar, you are more than welcome to send them to us on the sidebar of the webinar. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, and we will go through all the questions then. So now I will let Pär take over and go through the webinar.
Thank you, Madeleine, and welcome everyone. My name is Pär Österlund, and I will be hosting the webinar today, talking to you about how to make smart data work for you as a marketer. I work in the Bisnode product organization, so me and my team are making products for marketers to use data to do better marketing. I'll start with some background information about Bisnode, even though you probably know quite a lot of things about the company, given that you are participating in this webinar. Thought I'd do a quick recap just to make sure that you have the right context of that we are talking in. So Bisnode, we are a data and analytics company. We operate in 19 markets in Europe, headquartered in Stockholm in Sweden. We are approximately 2,100 employees, serving around 150,000 customers throughout Europe. We have about 3.5 billion SEK in revenues. And Bisnode has two business areas that we are strong in: marketing, which we will be focusing on today, and risk and credit, which we won't be focusing that much on today, but which also is quite relevant, especially if you are representing a retailer and want to also provide alternative means of payment than just upfront. But as I said, let's focus on marketing today. And I'll start with a few of the challenges that we will be looking at during the webinar. These will be, or at least I hope these are kind of very familiar to all of you, so we'll just have them as a short recap before we start digging into the real story on what to do with these challenges. The first one is about the customer experience. Studies show that 25% of customers will defect after just one bad experience. This means that bad customer experience is expensive. Another challenge we'll be looking at is data quality and kind of the freshness of data. You probably all sit on a fairly large database of consumers, of your customers. And of course, data is a very valuable asset, something we can do a lot of good things with as marketers. But around 20% of the data that's kind of fresh and up to date right now won't be next year. So data is changing fast, and we need to make sure that the data we work with is still accurate and up to date so that we make good decisions based on that data. The third challenge is compliance. And Gdpr has been a very, very hot issue this year, even more so during the spring and the summer. But we are all still working with making sure all of our operations are Gdpr compliant, both when it comes to what we do inside our companies, also how we work together with our customers to make sure we respect everyone's privacy, but still get the most out of the data we have and can have. Fourth, we have the cost of customer acquisition. If we combine the cost of customer acquisition with the cost of a bad customer experience, we see that it's really, really worthwhile to have a good experience, given that we will otherwise need to invest heavily in customer acquisition just to keep at the kind of revenue rate we are at now. So if we want to grow, if we want to invest our money in growth instead of investing it into keeping up with the current level, We have to make sure that we don't lose customers and that the money we push out to marketing actually help us grow. So these are some of the issues we will be tackling during the webinar. And to get things started, I want to give us all a joint task, a joint mission. That mission is to sell a Ferrari. So Ferrari, iconic design, lots of horsepower, a car many people dream of. But when we go out and sell a Ferrari, the first thing we need to do is find some customers. And if you want to sell a Ferrari, it's quite different from selling, well, a carton of milk, because the buyers of a Ferrari are quite particular. They need to fulfill two different characteristics. They need to be interested in supercars, and they need to be able to afford one. Since the Ferrari is a very high-ticket item, only few people can actually afford to buy one. So it's quite a challenge finding the exact right people to be our customers. So I'll look at how we could approach this problem through two different perspectives. First, through the perspective of traditional media-driven marketing, and secondly, through the perspective of people-based marketing. So if we start with the media-driven marketing approach, we would think about, okay, so which type of media should we include in our mix so that we can reach the people who want a Ferrari and who can afford a Ferrari? And so we would end up choosing something like, let's say, Supercar Enthusiast magazine to reach the people who want a Ferrari. And then we would choose something like Estate Planning Monthly to reach the people who can afford a Ferrari. And then we'd be quite happy because we can reach all of them, right? Well, in theory, yes, but in practice, no, because the overlap of people who want a Ferrari and who can afford a Ferrari is very small. This means that if we do the traditional media-driven marketing approach, we will be wasting a lot of money on people who aren't actually good prospects for us. What we would want to do instead is find the overlap of the people reading Supercar Enthusiast and Estate Planning Monthly. And this is where people-based marketing comes in. The whole concept of people-based marketing, as the name suggests, means that we want to choose the right people and then put our marketing budget and our marketing efforts on reaching those defined people. So if we take the people-based marketers approach to selling a Ferrari, we would first use data and analytics to identify the actual individuals who fulfill both of our buying criteria, meaning they both want to have a Ferrari and they can also afford to buy one. We would identify the actual people behind and then find the channels we can use to actually target those and only those people. This would, of course, be a much more cost-efficient approach. We would be seeing a lot better conversion rates compared to just going out in more broad media where we will have a huge miss rate. So let's look at this from a bit more systemic point of view, from a process point of view. How would this work? So if we want to do data-driven people-based marketing, what we do is we start with data. So we do a combination of using third-party data, such as that of Bisnode. We would then combine it with online behavioral data and first-party data that you already have. We would join together the data sets and apply some analytics on it to make sure we can identify what type of characteristics a good prospect and a good customer have. Then we would use those characteristics to create a target audience with identified people. And as the last step, then use the different channels in our portfolio to target those and only those people. This isn't, of course, a new approach, but what's new here is that we can do this more and more also in the online channels. So if we look at online advertising just a few years back, it was fairly similar to the media-driven marketing approach. We could create segments based on behaviors. We could, for example, have a Ferrari segment, which would be based on people who click on pictures of Ferraris. But this, of course, doesn't work very well because then we only capture one aspect of it, the interest and the intent, not the ability or the characteristics of the actual person behind the click and behind the device. And the cool thing now is that we can combine this data and actually create target audiences who we can then target in social media like Facebook, in traditional offline media such as direct mailings or telephone. We can use email, we can even use display advertising to reach the people we want to reach. So seeing this, you might be saying, okay, this sounds reasonable, sounds like a good and cost-effective approach to actually growing without having a humongous budget at our disposal, but does it work? And I'm glad you asked, because I asked the same question to one of our teams. We have a team over in Belgium who are very, very obsessed on closed-loop reporting, on actually getting the kind of data about the end results, about who bought and what they bought, and then analyzing that to prove what kind of effect the different data points had on our campaigns. Of course, we do this in other markets as well, but this has been a very, very strong trait in Belgium. So that's why I asked our team in Belgium to give me some data. So I asked them the question, what proof do you have that this works? Can you show me the numbers? And they said, well, Pär, actually we can. And here they are. So, sorry, it seems like the slide is a bit broken. Let's give it another try. Still not quite what it should be. Well, we will need to do without the proper slide and instead just look at the numbers which we have available here. So what I wanted to show you here was a uplift curve. And the uplift curve was based on 25 different campaigns that we ran through 8 different industries. So we looked at the traditional context-based targeting approach, which was quite close to random actually, meaning it was fairly linear, saying that if we want to reach 10% of our buyers, we need to reach almost 10% of the population. Then we started looking at, okay, so if we reach 10% of the population based on people-based marketing, based on the data we have and the analytics we can do, how big a portion of the buyers can we reach by reaching just 10% of the total audience? And the number was 42%, which means that we have a 4.2 times uplift by using data and analytics and selecting the right individuals for targeting instead of relying on context-based targeting, such as click behaviors or media profiles. And this is, of course, a huge difference. Just think about it, 4.2 times more effect. That's nice. So at this point, you might be asking, so what sort of data do you use to achieve these types of results? And the answer would be, kind of very broadly speaking, 3 types. Socio-demographic data, lifestyle data, and behavioral data. But that's not all the data we use, because this list does not include one of the most important data sources we have for getting a good uplift into any sort of online campaigning that we want to do. And that's the data you already have in your database. The data we have about past customer behaviors, past customer preferences, kind of the history that usually keeps repeating itself. And so if we want to provide a very good experience for the user, if we want to be able to target the right customers and target them with the right message, of course, it's not enough to just use third-party data, but we need to utilize the data that's already in your database. And this is where the solution that we will be talking about today, called Bisnode Consumer Intelligence, comes in. So, Bisnode Consumer Intelligence, what on earth is that? It is many things. First of all, it's one of the largest consumer databases in Europe with more than 100 million individuals in it. I think the number of the day was roughly 120 million European consumers. It's also a collection of algorithms that lets you match and connect your customer data with more than 1 billion data points available in the BCI database. And yes, so now I just introduced you to the nickname for the product, so Bisnode Consumer Intelligence, known within the company as BCI. Thirdly, it's also a identity concept. And this might sound a bit abstract and a bit boring even, and I'll soon explain to you why it isn't, but why the ID is actually one of the key game changers here. It's also available in 9 countries in Europe, with more to come. And it is fully GDPR compliant, also including some nice tools and features to help you become compliant and to stay compliant faster and cheaper than you could do without. So now back to the original question. What about the data you already have? How do we connect that into the whole loop? How do we make sure we utilize the data you have when we plan campaigns, when we plan the customer experience? Well, everyone should be doing it, but very few are. And if you ask why, the answer is because it's really, really difficult. So let's take an example. Let's call the person here identified by a complicated string of letters and numbers. Let's call this person Jill. Jill exists in quite a few databases throughout your company. The bigger the company, the more different types of systems and the more different types of databases Jill will be in. If you are with a mid-sized company, it might be 10 or 20 or 30 different information systems. If you come from a large enterprise, we could be talking about hundreds of different systems. CRM, ERP, point of sale, billing, marketing automation, campaign management, you name it. There are more systems than I can even think of on the fly here. So let's just stay with the few examples we have here on the slide. So let's say Jill is in your CRM, ERP, billing system, and point of sale system, and we want to connect all the data together. Well, we might have a situation where we know Jill's name and phone number in the CRM. We know Jill's name and her address in the ERP system. We know Jill's name and her email address in the point of sale system, and then we know her name and her address in the billing system, but it's actually her old address. So how on earth do we connect all of these data points about Jill together? Because the only common factor we have here is the name. This makes it very, very difficult to connect these together. So then the normal approach would be, let's start a master data project. Then we call in a bunch of consultants, they set up a project, they bill a lot of hours, and then we end up still having huge issues with connecting the data elements together because there's no common way of connecting it. We have Jill and the phone number and Jill and the address, and do we know if it's the same Jill? Well, no, we don't. So what's the solution? The solution is to rely on an external third-party referential database that includes all the information about Jill. So if we look at the Bisnode Consumer Intelligence database, it includes Jill's name, Jill's phone number, Jill's address, maybe Jill's email address, depending on the country we're looking at, and also Jill's old address. So this means we can just make an API call from any one of these systems and say, hey, Bisnode, here's Jill and Jill's phone number. Please identify her. Then we will do the identification towards the large referential database and return an ID. Next, you send the same call from the ERP system saying, hey, here's Jill and her address. You send it from the billing system saying, hey, here's Jill and her old address, and you always get the same answer. Well, we identified Jill, and Jill is ID A2FC, blah, 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 blah. And then we have an ID. We can just save that into all the different systems we are using. It's an ID that's persistent. It means it doesn't change over time. It's unique and it works cross-border. And after we have the same ID in all the different systems, it becomes a lot easier to connect all the different data points we have about Jill. This means we can create a 360-degree customer view. We can actually gather all the data about what did Jill order? Did she call our customer care hotline? Did she return any items? Has she received her invoices? Did she pay them? And we can get all of that gathered and connected. This is also really cool from a GDPR point of view, because within GDPR, when Jill comes knocking on your door asking for her data, you don't need to go into each and every one of these systems and try to identify Jill lots of times, but instead with the ID, we can just identify Jill once and then be able to connect all the data points we have and give it to her, thus being compliant. Because the tricky thing here with the compliance is, if we leave something out, we're in violation. If we give her a data point not actually connected to her, but to another Jill, again, then we're breaching someone else's privacy. So this needs to work seamlessly with not too much or not too little information. And that's why kind of outsourcing the problem of matching and creating an identity to someone with a large referential database makes so much sense. But this isn't the only thing we can use the database and the APIs for. Actually, we just reviewed the top 10 e-tailers in all the Nordic markets and looked at which ones are using Bisnode consumer intelligence. And we concluded that both for Sweden and Norway, 4 out of the top 10 e-tailers are using this product. In Finland and Denmark, 2 out of the top 10 e-tailers are using Bisnode consumer intelligence. But what are they using it for? Well, first and foremost, to automate the checkout flow and actually making the checkout flow smoother and easier and faster, and thus increasing conversions, which is very nice. So what we can do there is simply plug in the external database into the checkout flow. So when Jill wants to order something online, she doesn't need to type in all of her information herself. She can just type in enough information so we can identify her, and then we can autofill the rest. This is especially useful if Jill is ordering on a mobile device, because we all know what a pain it is to fill in an order form of 10 or more fields on a mobile device when you could just fill in one. And that's not the only benefit, but when we autofill Jill's data instead of making her type everything herself, we also make sure that the data we have is correct. It doesn't include typos, and it is actually kind of Jill's address and Jill's phone number that we have in there. And then we can have the certainty that we are shipping our products to the right person. And next up, I would like to introduce one case example of what we can do with this type of data and how we can use it to create a better customer experience and to generate more orders. So for the case, we have an example from NetOnNet. And this guy here on the picture, he and I have a few things in common. First of all, we are both named Pär. Second, we both spell the name with A with 2 dots on instead of AE. Third, we both wear glasses. And fourth, we both love e-commerce. So what did NetOnNet do with our data in order to double their conversion rate for their customer club sendouts? They used the data to identify what sort of people were in the customer club. So if you remember the process diagram I showed you right after the Ferrari pick, which had 4 steps in it, that's a very accurate description of what NetOnNet did together with us to improve the conversion. So first off, we matched up all of their own customer data. Then we enriched it with socio-demographic data and lifestyle data. Then we applied some analytics to create segments out of all of the people in the customer club. And then NetOnNet used these segments to send out much more personalized messages than they had been doing before. So this means if they were, for example, running a campaign about TVs, they could have a high-end TV with a home theater setup and all the goodies in it that would be sent out to, for example, a bit older people with high purchasing power who can afford to splurge on technology. At the same time, they could run a TV campaign towards young couples with low purchasing power for a more budget-friendly TV, and thus kind of making it more personal, making it more suitable for the target segment we created together. They were actually able to make people much more interested in the offers and actually double the conversion rate. And I'm fairly sure that each and every one of you would be very happy if you were able to double your conversion rate. And that's why we're here, right? To look at what sort of tools and what sort of techniques we should be using to do that. And this isn't just about the conversion. This is also about the customer experience. Because of course, we'll be creating a much better customer experience when we are sending out people offers for something that they are likely to buy and that they are likely to need, instead of something that's, for example, completely out of their price range. You know, I wouldn't be very happy if people would be asking me to buy a Ferrari given that it's out of my price range, but I'd be much happier with something that fits within my budget. So if we want to recap a little bit, what were the tools and the strategies we were talking about during the last 30 minutes? The solution we are proposing is built out of 4 components. We want to use real data about real people. So instead of using click behaviors and cookies and media profiles, we talk about real people and we have actual data about them. This data we want to use in people-based marketing. Instead of thinking about it through media or through some other abstract concept, we'll just focus on the actual consumers. But we won't be satisfied with just using third-party data. No, not at all. But instead, we want to combine it with all the data you already have. We want to get that data matched up. We want to enrich it with IDs. We want to create a 360-degree view of the customer. And then we want to use this complete data set as the basis for targeting our advertising, both online and offline. So if we do a little bit of a summary around what sort of tools are available through Bisnode Consumer Intelligence, you know, what type of solution it is and why it's valuable when you want to make data work for you. It's a huge database of consumers, both the actual data about who they are and a lot of descriptive data about what sort of people they are. It's available via an easy integration through APIs. It includes an identity concept, a unique personal ID that makes it a lot easier to mash up and connect all the data that you already have. And it's one solution that works cross-border. So if you are thinking about, okay, so it's nice that you have a lot of data and it's nice that you've made it available via APIs, but how much work will it be for us if we want to do something with it? That's why we've set up a developer portal. And kind of as marketers, this isn't directly directed at you, but this is more directed at the tech people in your team who are actually implementing this. For example, the ones who would be building a integration into the checkout flow to enable autofill functionalities. So once you get into thinking about how big a deal is this, what sort of data is available, how does this actually work in practice, the easiest way to find out is to just go into developer.bisnode.com and check out all the details for yourself together with your tech team members. So at this point, I'd like to open up for any questions you might have at this point so we can get a bit of discussion going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pär. So we had a couple of questions already, but you're more than welcome if you're listening to add some more questions on the sidebar. We can start with the questions we already got. So Pär, can you give some more examples on how retailers can and how they are using Bisnode's data when they are onboarding customers?
Yeah, for the onboarding part itself, the autofill functionality is the #1 way of using it. So in each and every checkout flow, you have some sort of order form where you need to kind of fill in your details and tell us who you are so that we can get your payment and get the shipment going. So what we do there is just make a API call into Bisnode Consumer Intelligence. So we could use, for example, a cell phone number or a personal number if that's allowed in your country, and kind of ask for the additional details. And then we could autofill the form instead of having the customer type in all the information themselves. And the effect of doing this, as we've seen, has been increased conversions and a improved customer experience. So that's kind of for the onboarding part. But then, of course, there are other use cases, like with NetOnNet, the example for doubling your conversion rate. The way NetOnNet used the solution was to match up their existing customer data and to enrich it with analytical variables such as sociodemographic and lifestyle data. And then we did some analytics together on that data set to create kind of meaningful segments that they could use in all their sendouts. And then there's also a third dimension to this that isn't directly related to onboarding, but that's a fairly common use case within retail, which is simply keeping all of your customer data up to date. So that's also a process that's quite easy to set up and automate, meaning that when Jill moves, you will have her new address. If Jill changes her last name when getting married, you will have the new surname. If Jill changes her phone number, that's automatically updated as well. So that's a very good tool for keeping all the data up to date. So when we do run analytics and create target segments and use the database to kind of optimize for a better customer experience, we're actually doing it with up-to-date data instead of with outdated data.
Great, thank you, Pär. Another questions. How about the time estimation and cost to integrate this and run this project?
Oh, that's a big one. That of course depends a lot on the environment you have kind of within your company. We've seen some of these integrations happen super fast, but that's kind of not the expectation you should have, because there are always some hurdles to overcome. So to get a good answer for that, I would suggest that you take one of the tech people in your team or in your organization and show them the developer portal at developer.bisnode.com. And they will be fairly quick in giving you an estimation whether it means an hour, a day, a week, a month, or a year, given the complexity of the infrastructure that you have in place.
Great, thank you.
We've done quite a lot of work to make sure that it would be as fast and easy and convenient as possible. So I'm sure that this will be amongst the easier and not the more difficult integrations that you would be doing.
And another question here, Pär. How big business or company is BCI target for?
That was a good question, since of course the bigger your consumer database or the bigger your customer database, the more value you can derive out of getting additional data and enriched and updated data. So kind of the bigger you are, the more value you will get. But BCI as a solution actually works for all sizes of companies.
Great. And another one here, which markets can we access to BCI, and how will you add more markets and when? And do you have any examples of which markets?
Yeah, so let's see how well my memory serves me. So we have the Nordic markets, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Then we have the German-speaking countries, so Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Then we have Belgium and Poland, and that should make it 9, right? And of course, we are in the process of adding markets, and we have a focus on the big European countries first. But at this point, I would not like to make any promises that I'm not sure I can keep as to exactly when we will be adding them. But I will give you a small teaser saying if you are interested in the UK, please send me an email and you can be a part of a special beta program.
Thank you, Pär. And another question, is there a BCI for Bisnode Company Intelligence as well?
Yes, there is. It's a solution called BBC, Bisnode Business Contacts. Actually, you can find details about how that works kind of in a technical sense from the same developer portal as for BCI. And also, if you're interested in doing this with company data, just get in touch and we'll hook you up with some experts who can explain it in more detail.
Great, thank you, Pär. And regarding the Nordics, we just mentioned before that we are having a lot of data there. What type of data do you have about individuals in the Nordics for BCI?
So we have kind of the basic contact information like name, address, historical addresses, and phone number. Then we also have some analytically derived data and analytical data. So for example, life stage, purchasing power. We also have information on whether or not someone has passed away, their date of birth. And we are constantly adding more of the descriptive analytical data into the solution. So if you want to see the exact definitions, again, the developer portal has it all.
Great. And are we allowed to enrich our data with Bisnode's analytical data regards to Gdpr?
There isn't a kind of clear yes or no answer to that. So with the data we have and with the solution we have made sure that it can be used to enrich a customer database. But what you need to do kind of under GDPR is to make a kind of own estimation of whether or not your kind of your balancing act between the individual's right to privacy and your interest as a business are kind of in sync and balanced. So that's a assessment or a estimate that every company has to make for themselves. But if you kind of conclude that this is the type of information we are allowed to process as a company, then we have a solution that we know is compliant for serving that data to you.
Great, and that was all the questions for now. If you have any more questions, please send them in as soon as possible now. Otherwise, we will thank you so much for listening to our webinar, and thank you so much, Pär, for telling us about the BCI.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening and for attending. And if you want to know more, if you want to get a kind of account to be able to access the data and test the solution, or get some more data on kind of the customer cases we've run, just get in touch with us and we'll help you out.
Yes, and we will send out an email to all of you who attended the webinar tomorrow, where you will have the recording so you can see all the slides that Pär has shown you, and also information about our solutions and how you can come in contact with us if you're interested to learn more. Thank you so much and have a great day.